Today on the Videomaker podcast, Chris and I talk all about camera movement. I think we literally cover every possible camera move. That's 10 basic moves. And I say basic, really we're talking about the basics of physics. A lot of these are actually pretty difficult to pull off. And then we throw in a bonus move at the end just for fun. I don't know if it's really a camera move. We're calling it a half of a camera move. But so 10 and a half camera moves. If you don't know all your camera moves, you're definitely going to learn a lot today. If you do know all your camera moves, maybe you still will learn something. So listen through. We talk about the easy ones up front and the difficult ones towards the end. So I'm sure you will all learn something new here. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we would love it if you went to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever, whatever app you like, and hit the subscribe button. It will deliver the podcast straight to your mobile device. Big help for us, really convenient for you. And if you want to support the show or support Videomaker, the best way to do that is to join our newsletter. You can sign up at videomaker.com/newsletter, and we will send you messages 3 times a week with tutorials and reviews and news straight to your email inbox. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. Try not to spam you. So sign up for that at videomaker.com/newsletter. And with all that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Videomaker podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, across the table is Chris Monlux.
Hello.
Chris, it is a great day to be getting paid to be indoors recording a podcast.
Oh, man, it's like the beginning of a heat wave here in California, Northern California, and it's supposed to get to the 114, 117 or something like that.
Yeah, in Arizona, I know it's supposed to be up super high.
Yeah, well, even here, it's supposed to be in the teens. Whenever it's 105 around here, which is usually in July.
Yeah.
It's it gets around 104, maybe 107, but it's supposed to get in the teens, low teens for us.
Yeah, this job we spend a lot of time in the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Which a lot of times it's like, boy, I wish I was out shooting video today because it's beautiful outside, being in California. But not today, man. No. It's nice to be inside.
Man, I remember just loathing the days of having to do shoots in the middle of the summer sun. I remember doing them on the asphalt at a car dealership in the middle of the heat, shooting, headphones on, Yeah. Oh, man, just sweating out everything.
Whatever the, weather person says in the morning, if you're on the asphalt, you got to tack on 5 or 10 degrees, right?
Oh, yeah, and no shade or anything.
Yeah.
We don't have the humid, but it gets hot.
So today we're talking about camera movements, but maybe one quick thing before we get to it. For anyone who's technically inclined, we have a new piece of equipment connected to our podcast setup, and maybe people can tell the difference. I don't know, but Chris, why don't you tell us what we're trying differently today?
Yeah, so it's called a cloud lifter, and it's for podcasters. Dynamic microphones and ribbon microphones, for that matter, they have a low output, and so you end up needing to use a lot of gain. And usually you can hear the noise in a preamp when the gain's really turned up high. So the idea of this is it boosts your input into your device, which we're using the Rode, what is this,
Rodecaster Pro.
Rodecaster Pro. And it increases the input into it by 25 decibels. And so for that, then you don't have to use as much of the gain on the board, and then it's supposed to sound better with less noise. And so it's not really it shouldn't do a whole lot for maybe what they're hearing, but you and I can have a little bit better distance because our mics will be a little more sensitive and whatnot. It might sound better, but the bigger thing is the noise will be a lot lower.
Okay, so maybe you folks will be able to tell the difference, but maybe not. If you do tell any kind of difference, the most obvious will be on Chris, because Chris is using a new microphone this week.
Yeah, this is the pod mic. So we're going through all the Rode mics here, trying them out. So this is a little bit different. So far, actually, I think I might like it because I can get off axis a little bit easier with it. I don't have to be right on it as much.
So Chris has got the new mic and the cloud lifter together, but for me, it's only the cloud lifter. So if I sound any different, it's the cloud lifter.
Yeah. Well, but I noise reduce all this before we publish it, so it might not sound anything different to them.
Well, if you don't have to do as much noise reduction, then maybe they can tell the difference there, right? Because sometimes noise reduction will kind of what do they call it? It just sort of clamps down on the sound a little bit.
Yeah, and the mic should sound a little bit better because the noise floor is lower, so you're able to hear the better part of the preamp working instead of pushing it at the ends, but we're not here to talk about microphones. Yeah. Everybody came here to talk about camera movement. What I thought, I thought about this, the subject, and this is the most visual thing. So we're going to have to do a really good job of describing what these things are because we're not demonstrating them visually.
Yeah, exactly. So, as I was creating the outline for this podcast, listing off all the camera movements we should discuss, I, of course, went to the Videomaker.com article about this topic, and I was like, okay, which ones do we cover? Went through them all, and I was just going, okay, well, actually, there's one move I think we're missing out of this article. So I don't remember what it's called. So I'm just going to Google this and see if I can find it. And of course, I found a bunch of other articles that other folks have written on this topic. And something I learned is, first of all, no two articles have the same list. They're different. Like some have some moves and some have other moves. And then the second is there's very little alignment in the actual terminology between these moves.
Really?
Yeah. So we're going to go through a bunch of terminology here, and you might have these shots or these moves as different terms, which is normal. So we're going to, from memory, we're going to do our best to try to recall what do other people kind of call this sometimes.
Totally.
But the idea here is we're going to go in ascending order of complexity. So the easy moves first, and then we'll go down to the harder moves and the ones that are not only more difficult to pull off, but the more difficult to find good use of in a story.
They're more specialty moves, really, that they need to have a connection with the content that you're shooting, not just for beauty or for movement.
Yes, exactly. So, should we get started?
Yeah, let's start the good old first thing you ever do, which is a pan.
That's right. Side to side turn.
Yeah, it's a left right to left, and when you're talking to someone, you might say a left to right or a right to left pan, and all you need is a tripod to do this. Although you could do it with your body by just kind of moving the camera handheld or moving your body more so.
Yep. So this is slightly more common than the next shot we're going to talk about, but generally, people see the world in a horizontal plane. It's the shape of the horizon. Human beings are vertically oriented, but the world that we live in is mostly horizontally oriented.
Yeah, we move from left to right when we go from place to place. So those types of moves. This is what we're looking at when someone gets our attention.
Yep.
We pretty much pan to look at what people are doing.
Yeah, exactly. You generally will turn your head or turn your body to focus your attention. You don't as often move your head up and down, but sometimes that happens. But this is the easiest thing to do. So it's camera on tripod, turn head side to side.
Yeah, and it can be follow action, it can be response to action, it can be a lot of things like that. The pan is one more than a static shot, right? So you're able to now have a little bit of movement in your scene. Now you're not getting a whole lot of movement differences. So because the camera's static and all you're doing is pivoting, it's not going to feel the same as other shots, but it will. It's has more dynamics to it than a static shot because that movement is going to draw your eye to whatever direction you're moving to the action that you're either following or trying to get to.
So these pans, and really I would say the same thing with any of these basic moves, they can sometimes be cheesy because, I don't know, it's just like typically when people are shooting video, they're new to it, they have their camera on that tripod, and they generally don't think so much about moving their camera other than grabbing the handle and twisting it around. And so, the more you do this, the more you start to, if you need to go from a subject in one location to another, you get in this mode of, okay, I'm going to actually move the camera to the new spot to get the new shot or whatever. I don't know, Chris, about you. When I have been most actively shooting video, I've noticed that I tend to use the pan less and less over time. The more I've honed my skills. But how about you?
Yeah, the thing about a pan that changed for me is when I started shooting 24 frames a second. And so because of that, your pan has to be slower as to not get a bunch of shutter in your scene. So that was when I first started shooting 24p, when it started being available in cameras to do so, or in video cameras, that is. That was the first thing to be like, oh, I got to do something different. This is back in SD, but it was still, you could tell that, if you did a fast, you could get away with a whip pan, which is a fast pan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you doing something faster, you either have to have a subject that the eye's watching and the background doesn't matter as much. But this is where that staccato, shuddery feeling gets if you move the camera fast, but not so fast that it's a whip pan. It's a gentle area, but I actually find myself doing pans, but in really small ways now. So trying to do a much, and I think this is in general shooting, is all of the actions have gotten more subtle as I've gotten more mature in my shooting. I think because it tends to be those are the shots that make the cut. And of course, always matters about subject matter and what you're actually trying to tell a story. But if I'm just looking for beauty and stuff, the slower pan is like subtle enough, but adds a little bit of movement. And it can be, for me, like I try to do a lot of slider shots and stuff, I actually can get that done really fast without having to make this complicated. So I can do a shot that has a little bit of movement in it, but I don't have to do any, it's just, I can get it done. It's bare bones. I don't need any more equipment to get this done. And sometimes you have to make those judgment calls if you're trying to get through the production in a meaningful, in a period of time that you don't have forever amount of time. You go, okay, I'm not going to do a slider move on this. I'm going to do a pan instead.
I think where the pan works out the best, as opposed to, a more fancy shot, which we'll get to shortly, is when there's no parallax involved.
Yeah.
So the parallax, just to summarize this concept, is like when you're driving down the highway, you look out the window and the things close to you seem like they're moving quickly, while the mountains in the background are moving slowly. Same thing happens as, you're seeing depth through motion. When you're panning only, the depth doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so that's really easy to tell. I mean, it's just kind of a cheesy look if you got this wide shot in a pan.
Yeah.
As opposed to if you're kind of in close on a subject where there's kind of one plane of depth and you can pan and you can't really tell as a viewer, is this a pan or is the camera actually sliding around?
And I think that's that speed thing, right? If I do this slower, it's going to look, or it's going to have the same feeling as something that has a higher production value, because I'll be out of the shot before one would be aware of the parallax.
Right. Okay.
I thought we could talk 10 minutes about a pan.
I know. Maybe we should change the podcast episode from camera movements to the pan.
To panning 101,
yeah.
Part 3.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We're going to have a whole series on panning.
Yeah, that's right.
Panning for gold. So the next one's tilting, right? So this is obviously the next movement we learn as children, when our necks start getting strong enough to keep our heads upright. And it's, up and down, right? So it's, I always think of the tilt of like, I'm looking up at the spaceship from just below it, and I'm tilting it down to show the rockets as they, take off or what have you. The tilt is very good for, revealing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can have a scene set up and actually move into another space so that you are able to have the story have some dynamics along with the shot.
Yeah, lots of reveals, you see this a lot where whenever there's a large object, you see this reveal starting at the bottom and revealing up. Like, look how it just keeps going and going and going for a really tall person or a tall tree or the rocket ship.
The bad guy, you're panning up to see him with the toothpick in his mouth and his glare in his eye, that kind of stuff from, seeing his hands punching together, you're panning from those. Oh, this guy must be some kind of tough guy. Those are the kinds of things that, you can do reveal or story, just progression, I guess, in the move there. You're not doing it with dialogue, but you're doing it with your narrative eye.
Yeah. Did we just use the word pan to describe a tilt? Sometimes that happens, right? Like a pan up and down. Yeah. It's going to come up a handful of times, I think, in this conversation.
This is, and because you said that, it started me thinking about it, and it's like, when I'm in the field, a lot of times you'll end up describing it as it feels, but you're also moving your body or doing that kind of thing. So you might use the wrong term, but people get what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And because these terms, I think, are used so together, pan and tilt. You get a pan, tilt, head. Yep. You're going to pan or tilt. But yeah, that I get the things interchanged, and I've been shooting video for 20 years, and it's like I still use the wrong term. So it's I think sometimes people would be embarrassed by that, but I think I've done it by now enough times and know that like I know what I'm talking about. I just the wrong words come out, you know.
Yeah, you know, people can say pan up or down, and that works. People know what you're talking about. You don't really say tilt side to side, tilt left, tilt right. That's not so much of a thing.
Yeah, pan tilt. Well, yeah. You know, I think if you're giving the direction in it, if you're saying tilt left to right, it doesn't matter if you said tilt. You know, it's just move the camera on the tripod from left to right.
Yeah, although
because those two words come together on a tripod. You're not, you know, that's how they're being used. Right?
Yeah. Okay, so how about the next one? Zoom. This is not a camera move, really. I mean, you're moving in the elements of your lens.
Yeah, you're showing less field of view. But you know, zoom these days. When was the last time you saw a zoom that was tactfully used for something? Like about the best example I could ever find is the extreme close-up on Wayne's World or something, when they're like, you know, just totally mocking being able to do these snap zooms.
You know, one I would say you see a lot, and this is one of those things where when you're in video, you see this, and maybe most people don't see it. You know, so subject in a movie or an interview is getting to a dramatic moment,
Yes.
and you see a very slow, very subtle zoom in, and it maybe the camera's moving closer, but it's so subtle, so small that you can't really tell the difference there.
Totally. Well, and that would be a time where I could hear a director saying, we want to do a push in on this.
Yeah.
And they, by saying push in, might mean, okay, I want to get a dolly out here and I want to push the whole truck towards the subject. Or they could just mean, I want to do a slight zoom here. So, you know, sometimes those words I think are interchangeable for the sake of they're meant to go to the next guy that's actually going to make the choice of what tool he's going to use to do that feeling that the director just asked for.
Right. So I've seen that a lot, and anyone who hasn't seen it, now that I've said it out loud, you'll probably see it all the time.
Yeah.
In dramatic moments in movies. In fact, that's one of those things where if you're watching a movie and someone is not being dramatic, they're just like speaking, but the camera is starting to push in just a little bit, very subtly, you can expect a dramatic moment to happen very soon.
Yeah. And you know, this is something that although I use, I don't do it in camera. So I tend to shoot over the resolution that I am producing in, and I'm doing this through scale of the video in post. So, you know, it's like, oh, the shot's too static, or I did an interview and we're just going to get to this really peak moment in the interview, and a tear's going to fall from his eye. And of course, I need to get tighter in that, right? So you time in, then you could just do it with scale of going, okay, I'm going to push in so that right when that tear's there, I'm a close up and no one really realized that we got there because it was so, you know, subtle or whatnot. But like just the zoom, like the zoom rocker you're using on your camcorder, or I mean, really, I guess there's plenty of if you have a servo controlled zoom on a interchangeable lens camera, that it's more helpful to get to a different field of view and using it to just frame, and then it is, I think, even used amongst a capture of a scene or whatever you're doing. It's like it's more so just using the zoom function on this lens to get to different framing.
Yeah, exactly. You know, this is one of those things where you saw a lot more zooms back when people were using camcorders with the zoom rocker. Now you don't see it quite so much because we don't have the super smooth zoom control on a typical camera lens, DSLR or mirrorless lens. So people just set the zoom to whatever they need and they shoot. No zoom rockers mean generally people aren't zooming inside of their shot nearly as much.
Yeah, well, I think it's also, you know, it's so I can think of a lot of 70s and late 60s movies that have like long zooms that are obviously manually zooms that are, you know, just a little weary, you know, as they're getting pushed in or pull out. But I think it's as the camera movement, the things we're going to move into next, which are the tools of actually moving around, that as, you know, sliders and dollies became smaller, lighter, easier to put into place, and cheaper, they became a better tool to get that same feeling. So zooms became obsolete they're just more rarely used because there might be a tool that you can use that'll have far nicer feeling that really isn't it's not like bringing in a crane to get a shot of a big building or some kind of thing that you need. You can bring in small stuff now and not have, it's not as a burden to get that into a production day more than just that one shot. You know? I mean, too big a production, you're not getting too many shots in it a day.
Yeah. So good segue to the next shot we've got here, which is the pedestal shot. This is the up and down movement of the camera. So not actually rotating on a pivot point, but the entire camera raises or lowers in elevation.
Yeah, and the place where I've seen this is in a newsroom or a news set, and they have motorized dollies to be able to get the right height to whatever, because the cameras are big and heavy.
Yeah,
and those are also on casters, so they can do the shot from the logo down on the desk and raise up and kind of push the whole camera towards the subject or whatever. Is that pedestal is really neat because you're getting a little bit of that parallax from changing the actual position of the camera, not just pivoting on a point. So this is where you start to get that fun play of foreground, background, subject matter.
Yeah. And this is like, as soon as you do this, if you have the ability to pedestal up and down, you're going to get one of these shots and go, ooh, why should I use the tilt anymore? This is so beautiful. You get the nice parallax move here. It's just like an incredible, beauty shot, an incredible way to reveal something.
However, a pedestal on a tripod or something like that, those aren't very typical. The one we have here is a crank one, and it's meant for photography. It's not meant to be smooth, and that's not really something that's found its mainstay into tripods and whatnot. So if you're able to do it, it's likely you bought a tripod so you can, or it's just a feature of your tripod that you can actually raise it that way. But most tripods you raise by the legs.
Yeah, or this is maybe one of these issues where we've got a little confusion of terminology. But the other way to do this, obviously, is we could do 2 other ways, 3 other ways. Is there more than that? Maybe 3. 1, handheld, just lift the camera up and down to get the same shot. 2, get a jib or crane to go up and down. Or 3, use a drone, get the same thing.
I guess I don't think the jib would be, because the jib, the up and down is actually changing X and Y as it goes up, because the distance that goes out and then in.
Yes, that's right. It's a little bit of an orbit. Yeah. You're right about that.
There's a little bit of a because you're pivoting on one point, you're getting either closer or further away. This is working knowledge. Yeah. This is that thing that it's like, oh, I know how that works because every time I do it, it does that thing, and then you eventually might find there's actually terminology to handle that, and it's still funny because no one still uses some of those terms. Yeah. They tell how they feel, what they're trying to do, and then it's your job as a cinematographer, as the grip or whatever part is to translate that into the language that you're trying to communicate with.
Yeah. Okay, good. Maybe a good segue to the next one, which is truck. So the next 2 moves use the same piece of equipment, but they're utilized differently. So the truck.
And they're confusing because the moves are names of not only the tool, but also parts of that tool.
Yes, exactly.
So the first is truck, which is the actual part of the dolly that you're setting on, right?
Yep.
That's called the truck, but it's also a move called the truck, which is side to side. So going left to right, right to left.
Yeah.
And definitely you see this in cinema. You see this in everything now. Yep. This is why sliders are so prevalent. It's just amazing to do this kind of stuff on product shots. The big thing on these kinds of moves is the bigger your shot, the more your distance your camera has to move. Mm-hmm. So example of this, we were shooting an exterior of a building. It's a street corner, and we wanted to get a little bit of parallax on it. But we were wide enough, and our dolly was only 15 feet, that going 15 feet was hardly enough to get you to actually feel anything. So we ended up just taking a photo and being like, well, it's better. The building looks better that way than presented with this kind of awkward, slow movement that's not being, there's shake for no benefit, right?
Yeah. Really, you're going here for this parallax view. So that's definitely something you want to take into account based on what your subject is, right? There's that famous shot in Saving Private Ryan of basically it's towards the first part of the film after they land on Normandy and the army is, coalescing, right, getting ready to proceed into Europe. And there's this shot of basically a giant dolly shot that is like following this truck driving through the army. And
Yeah,
it's just
it's
like,
showing the soldiers there
Yes,
and what they're having
exactly.
to deal with, and like telling all the little stories so they can get to the main story, but like by showing all the other sufferings around it.
yeah, so it's this big wide shot, and I don't know how long the truck move goes for. I'm going to guess it's 150 feet.
Yeah,
maybe.
I was thinking at least a couple hundred feet.
Yeah.
It's probably a really long track. I mean, it's a huge scene. We're talking about 100 people in the scene.
Yeah.
You know, but it's keeping along with, was it a vehicle or is it, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, there's like a Jeep or something driving
it's
through.
following in, and then that one and then it slows down and then follows the. So you can combine a lot of this stuff, but those moves. But the cool thing is, like you said, with the drone, you can do these types of moves. That's what we ended up. It's like, oh, now you can do an exterior of a building, and you could go from left to right, or you could keep it directly in center and orbit around it or whatever. We're going to talk about orbits.
You could do this with a stabilizer, and walk it if you can keep it smooth enough.
Yeah, or in post or whatever. Yeah, I mean, really, a monopod does all this stuff, right? If you got it all working together enough.
Yeah.
But definitely, I'd say you see a truck and the next one a dolly, in
Everything.
everything, and not only that, but it's like the percentage of shots that are offering one of these two moves is significant. And I'd say more so in film than in, like, say, TV, but in TV it's still pretty prevalent.
Yep.
Even outside of like the TV dramas and stuff, because it's valuable. I mean, I think I saw a cool slider shot on a cooking show that was the other day, it was live.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is stuff that's finding its way into high-end newsrooms and all the rest. They're doing even more than that of, putting Wolf Blitzer and making him like he was on Star Wars, like he beamed in or something. But anyway.
Yeah, I remember that. He was a hologram or something.
He was a hologram. That's the word I was looking for. Anyhow.
Yeah, so the next one, the dolly, is same thing, only in and out, forward and backwards.
Yes.
This, I think, Chris, is actually kind of a tough shot if you're, or at least a little tougher than dolly, at least, if you've got any kind of wide shot or anything other than a low angle, because your track is going to be in the shot.
Yeah. And the big thing is pulling focus doing this. So because of this, your focal plane's actually moving with the camera. So if you are trying to keep a subject in focus and you're pushing in on them, you're going to have to actually change your focus as you're pushing into the subject. That's something that I struggle with doing product shots, of trying to do that. It's actually nice having a camera with good autofocus, because it'll actually, if you can do it slow enough, it'll keep it. If it can't, it won't hunt. Mm-hmm. But pulling the focus, the good thing is like, because you're moving a given distance, the ins and outs of that focus should be very easily defined. You should be very easy to go, this is where I start focus, this is where as long as everybody stays on point in that kind of a space. But this is a really cool shot through a doorway, because you're able to really show the room blossom in front of you. You're going from kind of a small windowed view to now being able to see everything through the room. So that's a really cool tool. But the trick about your tracks is really have a long enough lens that your tracks are already out by the time you start. So you might actually be pushing through a doorway, but your focal length is so long so you can't see the actual dolly itself, that you're 15 feet out the door, yet your field of view is pushing through the doorway.
Yeah.
So that stuff starts to play in here, the space compression and how things interchange. Mm-hmm. But the cool thing is of course, the more zoomed in you are, the more all of the movements will be exaggerated, mm-hmm. will be more impactful in the way they feel, I would say.
Yeah, that's right. And then the other way you could get around this is just clone over the tracks.
Yeah, it's only just rotoscope afterwards and you're fine. Or do the shot the same way, and if you can get a motorized, that's really cool, because you can just do the shot a couple times with it in and out.
Yeah.
And then you just copy it with the mask.
And there's one other dynamic here to these shots, specifically the pedestal, the truck, the dolly, is you can combine them with pans and tilts to get some other, interesting effects.
Super. Well, and now you're starting to move all the axes, right? So like this is, you're talking really, there's a lot of aspects to think about. So think about if you're pushing in while tilting, you're going to have to tilt, and I say push in, so I guess I already used it, dolly in, dolly in, and you're having to pull focus, dolly in, and tilt at the same time.
Yep.
This is when two hands isn't enough. You know, you start to get to those things. That's where you either have support with, robots, which that's how I do it most of the time. Motorized slider with a pan tilt and head on it. That's all roboticized. So you can do it all over and over and over again, because these are shots that if you don't have a lot of time doing them, it's a quick way to embarrass yourself with how much you'll have to do it.
Yep, it takes practice.
Yeah, I remember the first time having to do some of these shots, and it's like, we're gonna do a couple more takes here. Yeah, that wasn't, the light was flickering. Yeah, that's it. Just find other things to blame it on so you can do a couple more takes, because you're like, I just didn't get it, but I can't say I didn't. Yep. You can only do that for so long. Trust me, people start to complain. But it's definitely. I'd say the truck more so than the dolly, but I like the dolly as my probably second favorite move in general. Is if I can do a truck on whatever I'm like, any subject matter. If it was you and I right now, and we were able to have motorized sliders keeping us in the center, it'd probably be more interesting. Now, it might be a little overwhelming with the two of our faces on the camera.
They're on simultaneously.
Yeah, they'd both be moving at the same time.
You get motion sickness.
Yeah, totally. I probably would.
There was a product, I think it's still out. I don't know for sure. One Man Crew. Do you remember One Man Crew?
Yeah, from Red Rock Micro.
Yeah, so it was like an arced robotic dolly.
Yeah, that just put a little laser, so you stood where the lasers met, and it kept you in the middle.
Yeah, because since it was arced, you didn't have to adjust your focus. You were always the same distance from the lens, and then it would just go back and forth. Come to a slow stop and then move back the other way. Yeah. And the idea is you set it up, and you don't have to touch it, and it's just like you get these nice smooth camera moves all the time. For something like this conversation, if we were cutting back and forth, that'd be super slick. Every time it goes to us, it's a nice subtle.
Small, subtle move. Yeah. The one man crew. There's definitely that's a big guy. That's a big thing. Yeah. It's something you need 2 tripods to set up and everything, and a lot it's the Arc Rhino 2, which I use a lot. Has also a follow focus on it too, so you could actually set it to do all those things. Parallax, and have it doing it automatically. And a lot of motion controllers are now doing that. Like that, they realize that's what a lot of people are trying to do, more complex shots by themselves. Yeah. But the big problem with that is if you're just going left and right, your focus is changing, right?
And you're panning.
Yeah, so you have your subject is actually, if you're shooting at any shallow depth of field, is actually the focal plane's changing. So of course the way to get around that is just don't shoot as shallow depth of field, or have some kind of automatic focus puller, or do it yourself. But it's hard to do when the machine's moving, and you have to. It's like machines work well with machines, people work well with people. It's when people have to wrangle the machines that it becomes harder.
Yep. So we talked about basically incorporating tilts and pans with your dolly and truck shots, but the next one actually is the most interesting, I think, which is the Zolly shot. Yeah. We're entering another level here of complexity. The Zolly shot, the vertigo shot, the Hitchcock zoom. I've heard it called the Jaws shot. These are all the same thing, right?
And this is like the feeling that the room is either expanding around the subject or getting smaller around the subject. Yeah. So it's like the person's becoming less or more important through the shot or whatever it is. I mean, I've done it on a drone now. Pretty cool, doing a Zolly in the air. But so the idea is if you're pushing in, if you're dollying towards your subject, you're zooming out. Yeah. And then if you're pulling away from the subject, you're zooming in. And what it does is it keeps your subject in the middle, but space compression starts to either elongate the space between you and the subject. So because your field of view is getting larger or smaller, you're getting this weird feeling. The Hitchcock is where I've seen it. It's the example that most people, but I've heard it called the Zolly far more than the Hitchcock zoom.
Yeah, young people these days haven't seen Vertigo.
Yeah. Well, and it's a. I mean, I've done it on my phone. I mean, you can do it with a pinch now. Just walk towards your subject and zoom in. And it's definitely, it's unnerving, right? It's like one of the most unnerving camera tricks really that you can think of. This is like just almost the magician move that you have as a cameraman or shooter in general is like, this is the one that I can really go, I'm going to mess you up with this shot. This is going to make you feel different.
Yeah. You know, you put it well here. The world is closing in or opening up to the subject. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but to me, it's always felt unnerving.
Yeah.
But certainly, if you're doing the move where a camera is moving away and zooming in, it's going to feel like the world is closing in, right? Like the field of view is narrowing,
and all the rest.
So that use might be good in a horror movie or something.
Yeah.
Versus if you're doing the reverse camera moves in and zooms out, you're now seeing more of the world, and this is a shot that you might use if someone has just dropped acid or something, and suddenly everything's wide open.
Yeah, just found out their parents are getting divorced, or they some kind of mind blowing thing.
Yeah,
you're like literally giving them the space to have a reaction for those things. But that's it. The closing in is really the unnerving one. The expansion is less so, but it's still useful. I mean, and you could use it for a lot of different ways, but it's a shot that will absolutely give you a feeling, and not all shots are meant to give you strong feelings. This is definitely one that is going to that is you need to use with need.
Yeah, and I've seen this done a couple of ways. One is a very fast move. So like in Jaws, this is a pretty quick move where the main character, I forget the character's name, realizes there's a shark in the water.
Shark.
Yeah. Which Jaws are you watching?
Yeah, Bruce. He's the only one in all the movies. It's Bruce. He's still got a ride.
Yeah. That's the one where it just happens like, usually they make some sort of weird sound effect,
I like how you added a sound effect to that. It is needed.
Yeah, and then the other one, I think it was in Pulp Fiction maybe. It's done very slowly as they're sort of sitting there at the fast food restaurant having a conversation. And if you're not paying attention, you won't notice, but the compression through the windows of the background to the street, starts to change over time. And so as the viewer, any change in emotion that you're feeling is you're not noticing that it's happening like, whoa, something weird just happened. It just sort of very subtly happens over 30 seconds or something.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a jarring thing, or it could be, I mean, I've seen a really long one, and I think they're just impactful in a different way and how you use it. But yeah, the Pulp Fiction one's a good one.
Yeah. Okay, so next one, roll. I have never found a good use for this one. This one is the camera rotating on its axis as if it's doing a barrel roll.
Here it's a new transition that a lot of people are using.
Yes. Yep.
Is I'm falling into bed, I'm waking up from on the beach.
Yeah.
I first saw it on a promo for the show Atlanta, which is Donald Glover's, he writes and produces and stars in, and there was promos for it. But I've seen it like on Supernatural promos where someone, falls back and all of a sudden they're in hell. It's like they went from heaven to hell or whatnot. And then I've seen it just on a crap ton of TikTok and or reels on Instagram.
Yeah,
it's a pretty easy, because it's just a cut. You're doing this roll, and then when you get to horizontal, it cuts to the other shot where you're all of a sudden leaning up. But because of the camera movement, you're completing a move, so you have to keep that same movement.
Yeah, I've also seen it. I can't think of the exact example, but a type of reveal where this is used in combination with some other kind of move, a dolly move or something, where it starts on a subject, and then the camera starts to move away from that and roll simultaneously, and realize, oh, that subject is actually on its side and it's part of this larger scene.
Well, your favorite Kubrick, right? So Space Odyssey, there's a shot where it's rotating because they're in space, right?
Yeah, that's super tricky one.
Yeah, but the camera and set are moving in that. But that's the feeling that you're being able to move in that way. And I tell you what, having to think about moving in different ways, it can be conceptually difficult to understand what these will look and feel like to a lot of people. I have no problem having a mind's eye of how a shot would do if I saw how the camera is supposed to move. But some people have a really difficult time with that. So this is where, you know, your storyboarding and your pre-production is really helpful, because not only will they know when this is happening, so, you know, it takes a special piece of equipment. Like, you're not going to do a roll on, well, you're not doing on a right now on a drone. Drone's not going to roll. I don't think there's any drones that can actually do that part slow. So, you know, this is a very specific thing that you'd have to be set up for if you want to use it. I've seen it on product stuff when really up and down doesn't matter. You know, when there isn't really a horizon that's about whatever you're seeing. It's more just lots of things that you can move. I've seen a lot with the those crazy long lenses that allow you to get inside something.
Oh yeah,
what the heck are those called? Yeah, and they're usually like wide angle, but man, I've seen the demo at NAB and they're interesting, and then I saw them everywhere just after that. Yeah. And so that can be pretty interesting. But, you know, thinking about moving the camera 360 degrees, that's some high end camera movement right there. Yeah. That's something where the high end motion controllers are going to struggle to be able to offer that unless you're using a very specific rig for it, or a robot. I mean, a robot on an arm can do anything.
And there's two levels here, right? So there's the roll that happens on axis, the camera itself is turning, versus the roll that's off axis, where it's rotating around a pivot point that is away from the camera. So imagine the camera on a monopod, and the base of the monopod is the pivot point. The whole thing turns like a clock hand. Yeah. Right. That's the thing that you're talking about, right? Where it's the going to bed, waking back up, where the whole thing is tilting like a clock hand down to 90 degrees and then back up from 90 degrees. Yeah. Like a big spin. But yeah, really, really complex shot for sure.
And something that just as cool as a lot of complicated shots can be, make sure you have the need is actually there. You know, it's the good thing is try all you want to this stuff. This is great stuff to get practice on and everything, but you know, productions don't have to be expensive in this way unless it really serves the story. If it serves the story, do it. I mean, I think in Kubrick and Space Odyssey, man, great scene, like groundbreaking filmmaking at the moment. Man, if you're at that level, do it. But we're not. I don't think we're talking to too many Kubricks out there right now. If you are, you know, give us an email. We'd like to follow your career. But you know, realistically, probably not a shot. I mean, I can't say. I'm trying to think of a situation where I've actually been able to accomplish a role with any equipment that we've had or in this office, and like it's
you can get a partial roll with a stabilizer. Right.
Yeah.
The stabilizer isn't going to go all the way around 360, but you can get part way.
Yeah, that's true. So that's how you do it on a bigger scale. That's not like a small motion controller, but it's rather a big shot that you totally could do it that way. Yeah, that's a good idea.
But that's why, you know, you said make sure you have a reason for it. I would argue that maybe there's one other way you could do it without the reason, which is make music videos. That's why music videos are so fun. You could just experiment and get some wild shots.
Yeah, in fact, that's man, I'd have to say that might have been some of the driver of what I wanted to do. I'm like, oh, they're montages that are usually free form, don't even have to tell a story, just sometimes can just be out there and that's enough. Yeah. And that's, I don't know, for me, it's like being extravagant just for the sake of it, not for any purpose. Kind of fun. Yeah. You know, it's fun to, I mean, I get to do that all the time. Like, I got to see if this works. I guess I got to dream up some kind of shot to do. And so you have to do this. So it's good practice, don't get me wrong, but if you're trying to do this on a budget, some of this stuff is going to be difficult to pull off for a reasonable price.
Next one on here is tracking. So this is like, you know, actually Kubrick did this in The Shining, right? Danny on his tricycle riding through the hotel, and they had the Steadicam following behind. Follow. You know, that's the tracking. It's tracking. You go down the hallway, turn left, the camera would follow. So this is a combination of using a stabilizer or handheld, combination of, you know, all of the moves we basically just discussed, right? Yeah. Side to side, you're talking your dolly, your truck, your pedestal your zoom and your tilt, depending on what you need in the moment.
Yeah. And, the cool thing about these things is like, these are definitely, if you have a handheld stabilizer, I remember using, it was the DJI Osmo Mobile, really small guy, right? And going down, we must have been in Vegas or something. I was at one of the casinos, and being able to walk and, walk forward and go up and then go down and walk around. And it pulls those things off really good. It goes really smoothly, really great use. If you have to like tell a story of someone moving, going through an airport. Man, I went through an airport with it too. I don't know where I was at.
I remember that video. Used it for a review.
Yeah. This for
I
something.
think that was it. It was the Osmo Pocket.
Oh, no. It was the original Osmo Mobile, or Osmo with the big eyeball one. Cause I went to Miami, and it was at the airport. Yeah. Going to Miami. Cause I also shot some crazy, Lamborghinis outside the hotel, and I remember orbiting them. But walking and doing these high-end shots, it's pretty freeing. Being able, like really between a gimbal and a drone, you can get some high-end shots that years ago, not even that long ago, were very expensive shots to do. You had to have a lot of experience doing it, and it's not terribly hard, especially a motorized gimbal, to get good shots if you don't need real long ones. I mean, if you're shooting, you need a 1.5-minute long shot.
Yeah.
Practice a bunch, you're gonna need it.
Yeah, this is definitely something that has become easier over time, but people are doing some crazy things.
Yeah, sorry. I just noticed I'm not running a backup right now, but I am recording on here. So
I just saw you put your head in your hands like,
yeah, recording. I'm like, there's no recording over here, but this is on, so we're good. Oh, man. That was oh shit, just real quick.
Yeah. But people are doing some really crazy things with stabilizers, right? So like the whole thing of you're tracking someone through a building, they jump through a window, you pass the camera through the window to someone else on the other side. You take the camera, you mount it to a crane, it moves, you hand the camera through a car, there's someone inside waiting for it. Like, people do some nutty stuff with these tracking shots.
Our friend Jason Miller, that's what he won. He won some Emmys on a promo that he made.
Yeah, that's right.
That was started out as gimbal, and then went on to a big jib crane, and then revealed dancers and all sorts of stuff. So the shot was able to go real personal following. This reminds me of like what they do on award shows, like the opening acts, when they go from outside and then all of a sudden they're inside on the stage, and someone followed them all the way there. Or Birdman, that movie, that's all that. But
yeah,
that there's so many, it's so interesting to do that. However, without following a subject, those kinds of gimbals and stuff, it's great for weddings when you're following a bride down the aisle and that kind of thing. But once you're stopped, it's like you went from super dynamic to super basic real quick. So that's the thing that I've always struggled with is how to get in and out of those types of grand shots in a way that your next shot is still either continuing some movement so it's not jarring, or not jarring because you're all of a sudden coming to a halt.
Yeah, that podcast where we talked to Jason, he tells us about that production. Episode number 46 for anyone who's interested.
Did he tell us about the production?
Not you. I think you were away. He talked to Haley and I.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So you can go to the website. I don't know if I don't know if Apple or Spotify goes back this far, but Videomaker.com. Look up podcast episode 46. You can listen
46.
To that. Yep. Boy, we've done a lot, right?
Yeah, we're in the 80s now.
Yeah. So that brings us to the last one of the list, which is the orbit shot, or the arc shot is another term for this. I feel like this has been around for a long time now. Everyone's doing it because drones do it so easily. But I always think of this shot. Obviously, this orbit shot is the idea where the camera moves around 360 degrees around a subject and keeps a subject in place. Michael Bay used this all the time. If you ever watch Bad Boys, the camera is always orbiting, and it's orbit shot after orbit shot. And personally, it kind of makes me dizzy watching it. But
I think of the fight scene in Fight Club in the basement. And now that's really interesting because they're like actually they're cutting back and forth from different perspectives while also doing an orbit. So they had to make sure that, if they were in one place, the dolly wasn't viewable. And so they actually had someone picking up the track behind them and then laying it down once they were back out of the scene and everything, which is, really probably the smartest and easiest way to do it if you're not doing something super fast and you're able to do that. But the orbit shot is super, super impactful And in real high end, this is another one that you wouldn't be perfect orbit if you're on a handheld gimbal, but is a great way to, show somebody off. It does a lot of, it does a reveal of, different sides of a subject or whatever. If you're doing a statue, it would reveal who the statue's of or whatever you're moving around. You're able to do that same kind of feel as that pan up from the feet or pan down or whatnot.
Yeah.
Tilt. I just used it wrong. Man, listen to us. We know what we're talking about, people.
That's what happens when you go off script,
Yeah.
It's all improvised, right?
Yeah, totally. But the orbits, they're really super easy with drones. I mean, this was one of the real high-end drone moves. I remember when maybe the Phantom 3 and the era around that, maybe 90 or 15 maybe or so, that orbit was something that was kind of difficult and most drones weren't doing it. And now it's like every one of them does it and then they do it in their own way. So, there's they have ones where it orbits and it goes up in elevation. So that's more of the arc. Well, they have a different name for that. Like
it orbits and changes elevation. Boy, that's like a corkscrew or something.
Yeah, well,
right?
they call it's like a shooting star is what they call it. It's like you could do like you threw it and then the POV of the camera is this thing, it goes away from you. But they also have one where it's like small world, so it does the makes you into a little globe as you go away, and
Yeah,
so
that's right,
it plays with not only like your field of view but also the camera movement. And because the drone's doing it, it's very precise. So they're very, unless you're in like real heavy wind, you're going to get a really spot on. And that's really the thing about any good camera movement. If it's solid, it's high value. And so that's the thing. Don't have shakes in your camera movement. Get rid of all that. Practice your tilts, your pans, your zooms, all that stuff as smooth as it possibly can.
Unless you're going for the shake.
Yeah, well, unless you're shooting handheld or shooting, what's the movie about the spy guy that went rogue and man, that's like every spy movie.
Yeah.
My God.
The spy guy that went rogue.
Matt Damon.
Born
Identity. Yeah. Like so much handheld. And that's like handheld going from fight scene, going into a car and doing that kind of stuff. And that's only stuff you could do through either handing it off or those kinds of things. And I love seeing the behind the scenes of those choreography because it's like as close as like filmmaking gets to ballet. Is like it's beautiful just to watch like, oh wow, look at that. They put that wall there. So while they handed it off, you don't see the next set of hands so that they can block it for a second, but it like helped with the energy of everything. And you'd never even think of it. Some of the most impressive things are like just cuts at the right time to make it seem like the movement hasn't stopped, or not.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to throw in a bonus move.
Ooh, one extra bonus move. What's that?
I don't know if this is even a move. You tell me. Actually, boy, is this a move? I'll say it. You could tell me if this is a real move.
I'll judge you harshly.
Hyperlapse.
It's kind of a combination of things. And so here's what hyperlapse is. Hyperlapse is time lapse, but the camera's moving
over large distances. Not using a robotic head or slide.
This is actually something you can do on your own with just using Google Earth. Because the images are moving in space, you can get a different image and you can put them together and you can have a hyperlapse of driving through your city and turning wherever you want and all that kind of stuff. Kind of a fun little thing if you want to do that on your own.
Yeah, but if you wanted a shot of, the Capitol building where you orbit the entire building and the stars are streaking through the sky while it's happening, you would do this through hyperlapse.
I don't know if you could get the stars streaking.
Well, maybe not start, but you see cars streaking by.
I guess it depends on how long you're doing. If you're doing 10-second exposures and doing around it, you might be able to finish it in a night. But
you take the camera, you move it on its tripod, you put the tripod somewhere else, you take an exposure, you move the tripod to the next spot.
And this can be done, very diligently, right? So you're moving a certain amount of space every time. You just have, a spacer by a 3-foot dowel, move 3 feet every time. Or you can do it somewhat laissez-faire. Because through stabilization and because they're images, it's actually not terribly hard to image by image have them line up and it actually get a lot smoother. But you want to be shooting at a high resolution so that the edges you're able to move around and have that movement, because the cool thing is, since you're moving so much, there isn't a point of reference really to know that things aren't as smooth as it might seem, unless you have like, what did I do one? I did one on a track, and you could tell I was screwing up because I was going into different track lanes. So it was like I was zigzagging on the track, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Okay, I just need to follow this way. But it's it's like time passing with movement. So, it'd be like the mall closing down, and it's like you're moving out, people are zooming around you, and lights are turning off as you're moving out the door, or something like that. Great use of it. I think that's a camera move.
The camera moves, but it kind of moves using the same concepts that we've already talked about.
Yeah, it's just more time as the thing that's being manipulated.
Yeah. And the camera doesn't move while it's recording. The camera itself just stays still. Yeah. And then you move it between shots.
Yeah, the distance is covered through the images you don't take.
Yes. Very well said. That sounds like...
That's kind of weird. That
sounds like a philosophy of life or something.
I just got a fortune cookie said that.
Yeah. Okay, so there we go. 11 camera moves, or 10 and a half camera movements.
And this is a longer episode. This is 53 minutes or so far. So
there you go.
We were thinking about a half hour. Can we talk about camera movements? And it's like, yeah.
I really think we should go back and pick a very specific topic and see if we can go for 30 to 60 minutes on it.
Yeah, just as a challenge.
Every time we're like, can we really do this much time on this topic? Well, let's do it. Like 60 minutes on the record button, just the button.
Yeah, we need a countdown thing just to like challenge us. I was actually thinking of like, also if we did it where it's like a lightning round. So every 2 minutes we have to change subjects.
Oh, there you go.
So like, you do that way, or get all the stuff, organize it as cards or in a hat, and we just pull this. They're all related, but we pull the subjects out of a hat. So every 2 minutes we just we have to then talk about it.
Yeah, I like the lightning round. People might be frustrated listening to that, but maybe
I don't care. I'm just kidding. We actually work really hard to make sure you guys enjoy the stuff, but it'd be fun to be able to get nutty, I guess.
Yeah. So at any rate, there you go. 10 and a half camera movements. And maybe we'll invent a few more for next time. We'll work in the fifth dimension or something somehow.
Yeah, you'll have to.
I don't think it's going to change.
Auras in it or something.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know how you do that.
Yeah. Anyways, thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you next time. Big thanks to everyone for listening. If you made it this far, this means hopefully that you like the show. So we would love it if you went to iTunes and hit a 5-star review for us. And if you want to write something, that would be extra good. We always go there to check for written reviews. We read every single one. That would be a big help for the show. It gives us all kinds of new visibility. So for Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.